Welcome to Cutting with Cronquito. Have you gone and sharpened your chain and it's sharp as can be and it still doesn't cut? Let me show you what I would do. All we need is this and a depth gauge, and I'll show you how to make that sucker cut like crazy. Follow me. Before we get too carried away here, I want to give you a couple of tips that work for me. Give them a try, maybe they'll work for you too. First thing, you're going to want to find somewhere comfortable, a good work area. I think I've got a pretty good spot here. Another thing you're going to want is a pair of gloves. Keeps your fingers from getting all scratched up and stuff off the chain. Of course, you're going to want your file. You got to make sure you've got the right size file. You use the wrong size file, you'll mess up your chain. I probably do things a little bit different than other people, so might work for you if you try my technique. It might not. Tighten your chain up a little bit, probably more than you would normally use it. That'll help the chain from twisting when you're filing. It'll help keep it lined up nice and straight. One of the things we're going to look for is consistency. The more consistent you get it, the smoother it'll cut. Like if you have one tooth that's yay high and the next tooth is yay high, this one's going to grab and this one might not even touch the wood. So you want them consistent. And over the life of the chain, if you sharpen it consistently, it should pretty much keep the tooth height and the length consistent. Who cares? Let's cut some teeth. Now for the depth gauges, these little guys here, if I knew how to zoom, I could zoom the right way. There we go. These little guys here are the depth gauges. And these, when you're passing through the log or the branch or whatever you're cutting, the wood hits here and it only lets this tooth bite in or take in such a certain amount of material. So if these are too tall, it's not letting the chain, the cutting tooth, touch the wood. If the cutting tooth isn't touching the wood, you're not cutting wood, right? So they've got these. You'll find a lot of times if you're not hitting the rocks and you're only filing a little bit off of each tooth, basically you're touching it up every gas tank and you're not taking 20 swipes off of each tooth, and your teeth don't look like these teeth in a week. Most of the times you're going to find you don't have to do anything to the depth gauges. They'll wear, just rubbing on the wood, they'll wear, that rubbing action will wear down that depth gauge pretty much where it's supposed to be. There's a couple of different styles here. Let me come back out. You are going to want to do this with some type of idea as to what depth you're grinding down that depth raker. You don't want to take it too far, then the tooth is trying to bite too much wood. You want them all the same, otherwise it gets real jerky. Kind of like go stop, go stop. It's not a smooth cut. So both of these, what you're supposed to do, got a little file here, is you're supposed to set them on here, okay? That one would sit like so. You're going to set this and you're going to push so it's touching this tooth in the front and the tooth attached to the depth raker in the back, right? And then what you would do, that little part sticking up, you would file. I'm I'm on the wrong side. You would file that tooth off until you saw the file cutting into your tool. So like that. And now that tooth shouldn't be sticking up. And you would go just every one here. You could do this backwards, I guess. And this is the same. This one has two different depths, 0.03 and 0.025. And you throw it on the ground and it breaks, and then you can't use it. And you got to go back to the steel dealer, and they're out of them, so no depth gauges for you. See? Broke it. Okay, so this type you would set. Let's zoom in a little. Waha! Too far. See our numbers here? This is 0.03. And this side is 0.025. That's where I want the cutting tooth to be when I set this on there. And then the depth gauge will pop out of that little hole. And you would do the same thing here. You would file this until you started scraping on the tool here. You're going to find that you're going to want to push or pull depending on which side you're doing. You're going to want to move the file to the side that depth raker is on. For example, this one, as I'm looking at it, is on the opposite side of me, so I'm going to want to push to the opposite side of me, like this. This one's on the close side to me. I'm going to want to have the file come towards me. Of course, you would have it the right way. And what this does is it keeps that tooth from jumping around. Hear that? That's like fingernails on a chalkboard. If I turn that around and take it towards the side it's on, it's doing its job now. Let me move you down here and show you something. Okay, so from here, you've got a little bit different angle you can see from. Let's find some new teeth. So this first style, you can see my finger right in the way. See that tooth is sitting above that gauge, and I'm pressing down on the front and back of this. That needs to be taken down to the level of that guide there. Next tooth back, fingers in the way. You can see that sticking up above that guide. It's not a lot of material, but it makes a big difference on your cuts. Try this other guide here. See him sticking up. Not a whole lot. Enough to make it slow down in the cut though. So what I like to do is just take the same amount of material off of each tooth, but you have to kind of have an idea where you're at. You can take something flat and lay it, let's use this tooth right here. I would lay my file or screwdriver, something straight, on the point of this to the point of the next one back. So from here to here, okay? I have to go down a little bit. If you do that, you can look at the depth gauge and see if it needs to come off any. And you can see this one has just a little bit of air. Let's make sure we're on the point. Point to the point. It's barely. Let's look at this one. It needs to come down. I like to have about a 1/16 of an inch of light in between that cutting tooth and that depth gauge. And the back of that depth gauge is actually touching the file. Let's see what 4 little swipes did. A little bit better. It's hard to tell from that angle. I'm not there yet though. That's why these are nice. You can just set that on there and say, yep, more needs to come off. You can see it's not a whole lot, but it's a little bit needs to come off of there. Now we're looking good. Same thing with sharpening. You want to be real consistent with all these depth gauges. You want to take off the relationship between here, here, and here has to be the same as the relationship on these 3. And so on. The more similar their relationship is, the closer you get it to being the same, the smoother it'll cut. Unless you take too much of that tooth off, too much of that depth gauge. If you take too much depth gauge, it will let too much tooth try to take too much wood, and basically you will stop your chain. The more aggressive you get it, unless you have some monster chainsaw built for racing, those guys probably just cut those completely off. But for normal use, you want probably about a 1/16 of an inch of light in between your flat object and the top of 3 teeth, which didn't make any sense. Top of 2 teeth. I'm only human. Don't beat me up. These are real handy. Either way. Even if you're not using them, like this one, I just scraped off a bunch of my metal, so that changes the depth, right? See how shiny that is? That's me running a file on it like a dummy. So probably what I should have done is looked at it, felt it, yep, needs some more. There's 3, check it, feel it, nope, it's good. Consistency and a good file. So with the depth gauges, if you were afraid of going too far and making it too severe, I would suggest taking a very small amount of material off of each depth gauge, and then going and making a cut and seeing if it's jerking the saw out of your hands or grabbing and stopping the chain or still cutting too slow. Then you'll know, okay, let me take a little bit more. Best thing to do is have a depth gauge and just use that depth gauge and make them all the same. Alright, depth gauge is down. Not too bad. Thanks for watching. Check out my other sharpening videos, and we'll see you next time. Peace!